What is up, squad? It is your anxious squid, aka Jules Centauri, and today I'm coming at you with another Australian history story from a growing playlist called Storytime with Jules. I'll be sharing this one on Facebook and YouTube because this story happened much closer to where I grew up in the Wollondilly, back home in New South Wales. And my analytics on YouTube are telling me that a bunch of you dilly boys are way too lazy to click on the link to YouTube when I post it to Facebook. Apparently the best way to get your attention is just to pop up on autoplay while you're still scrolling through your news feed. So, g'day guys. I'm hoping this will drive people over to subscribe anyway, but I'm getting off point now. Today's video is about the truck blockade that effectively shut down a nation on Razorback Pass in 1979. Or it's about how the little guy can sometimes reclaim his power with relative ease. First and foremost, if this is seriously the first time you've seen one of my videos, head over onto YouTube if you're not there already and hit subscribe and watch a bunch of the other ones. I've got an Australian history playlist with videos like this one. I've got a spoken word poetry playlist, and in the next couple of days my EP's dropping. I've got travel vlog, I've got reaction videos. You should hit subscribe. I'll give you a cookie. I won't really give you a cookie, but enjoy this cookie emoji for free anyway. So here we go. In April of 1979, tensions were hot amongst truck drivers all around Australia, not just in the Wollondilly, which is around here-ish, just FYI. In the year prior to 79, which was 78, there had been protests for better pay and working conditions for truck drivers all across the country, with the total loss of working days estimated to have risen over 4 million for the first time in the country's history. One gets to that number by calculating how many folks are working when they would or should have been, then adding up all of those days collectively, so everyone's days. So let's say 700 drivers, for example, missed 2 days of work each to protest. That'd work out to 1,400 working days missed. 2,100 working days if they each had 3 off, 2,800 working days if they each had 4, and so on and so forth. All up, they'd missed over 4 million days in 1978. An absolute buttload of protesting, especially when you consider that the entire population of Australia in 1978 was only around 14 million and a half people. Clearly, the protesters felt their message wasn't getting through. Otherwise, there'd be no more need for protesting or an eventual blockade. The cause for the protests, in a nutshell, can be boiled down to a long-running, three-way, multifaceted dick-measuring contest. The contest was between the government, employers, and the workers' unions, none of whom had truck drivers' best interests at heart, in my opinion, based on the evidence I've seen. Ask anyone involved at the decision-making level at the time, and you'll get a varied response, or a varied amount of long and boring political reasons for certain road taxes and laws being in each state by state. As with every political drama I talk about, no matter whose version of events you choose to believe, you can't really do so without tacitly accusing someone else of lying at some point down the line. Some estimates at the time had the truck drivers in New South Wales paying over 20k a year in road tax. Others didn't. I wasn't there at the time, however the well-known radio shock jock John Laws was. And if you haven't heard of him, you can safely think of Alan Jones or Ray Hadley, and you won't be far off the mark. He took the side of the blockade, and it turned into a nationwide campaign for the battlers through his radio. The whole thing was actually caused by road taxes. Well, more specifically, it was because of truck owner-drivers wanting to be exempt from some road taxes. A swathe of truckies weren't happy in the union, weren't happy with the union who were looking after them at the time, the Transport Workers Union, and that relationship would get decidedly worse before the protests and blockade were over. But I'll get back to that in a sec. No matter who you believe, one thing can be absolutely certain. Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser was being bullish in terms of the economy at the time. Specifically, in terms of how much the federal government was going to give to each state to help out their state economies. When the New South Wales Parliament initially looked to alleviate some of the pressure on truck owner drivers, as a result of the overwhelming need to and due to the protests the year before, Fraser's office had this to say, primarily about New South Wales decision making. The federal government has significant flexibility in making future decisions about the level of assistance to be provided to the states. The Commonwealth government will not ignore the implications of irresponsible decisions made by individual states. Now, for anyone that doesn't speak fluent politique like I do, that can be roughly translated to the feds saying, if you create a financial clusterfuck, we're not going to bail you out. And again, nothing being without context, that was the federal parliament flexing their muscle on the little guy themselves, so to speak, because the Times New South Wales State Premier, Neville Wran, he was one of the few Labor leaders left in the country 3 years after the Whitlam dismissal, and the environment was not one where he could really afford to stick his neck out, especially in regards to fiscal irresponsibility. Or where it would be seen to be fiscally irresponsible to the public anyway. So the New South Wales government, obviously feeling like their hands were tied, did nothing. As of April 3rd, 1979, when the blockade had begun, New South Wales was the only state within the previous 6 months to not have negotiated better terms for employees through industrial action via a union of some kind. Not necessarily truckies, but someone. So not only were the truckies all sitting there feeling unheard, but they were legitimately watching other industries around the country being heard at the same time. I'm just going to pause the video here real quick because reading back over the script I'd written myself, I feel like I'm coming across as a little unfair on the New South Wales government of the time. For my own satisfaction, humour me here, I need to mention that Premier Neville Wran was the dude who decriminalised homosexuality in New South Wales. He pioneered the Anti-Discrimination Act, he increased the number of national parks in the state exponentially, and he disallowed the logging or the individual chopping of wood within said national parks. He oversaw the installation of the Powerhouse Museum and the Wharf Theatre in Sydney. He won an election as a Labor leader not even 5 whole months after Prime Minister Gough Whitlam had got the boot. I think it's not an understatement to say that he can be credited with picking up and holding on to the threads that would later be refurbished and rebranded as the fabric of the Labor Party. The point I'm making is he wasn't an asshole. I actually think he was one of the good guys in office based on everything I've read about him. Before Bob Carr, he was the longest serving New South Wales Premier of all time, and I think he was just stuck between a rock and a hard place on this one, which is an unfortunate legacy for him to have. But anyway, back to the truckies. The days are grinding on and they're getting more and more annoyed at the lack of action by the people in charge. 2 truckies in particular, Ted Greendog Stevens and Spencer Watling, were especially sick of waiting. Both Stevens and Watling had previously seen the inside of jail cells for unpaid road taxes, and neither felt that the unions were even trying to help them, given the comparative zest of other states' bodies and other state unions. After being knocked back by the Transport Workers Union again for a request to go down the path of arbitration, an informal meeting of 20 men was held at Ted Stevens' home. At the end of the meeting, 5 committed men decided that they would take it upon themselves to block the Hume Highway at Razorback. The others opting out due to the Transport Workers Union not supporting the blockade. On April 3rd in 1979, Ted Stevens, Spencer Watling, Colin Bird, Harry Grimson and Jack Hibbert parked their trucks across the Hume Highway, blocking traffic in both directions, bringing the nation to a complete standstill. The men stood their ground and their blockade lasted for 9 full days. Unfortunately, though, it could be argued that the working class's distrust of unions started right there at that point. The official stance of the Transport Workers Union at the time was that its members were to stay at home if they were protesting or to go back to work if they weren't. Definitively, not a blockade, or the support in any way for any kind of blockade. Ivan Hodgson, the Transport Workers Union Federal Secretary, suggested that union members simply blast through the blockade at full speed to end the chaos. It's safe to say his comments did not earn him the respect of the men that were on the mountain at the time. We shall be asking for police protection, and we expect it to let our members through. If the police cannot get them out, then we will. There are 105,000 of us in Australia. Somehow, I doubt Hodjo had the support he thought he did, though, because during the week and a bit long process, Dick Smith, who, incidentally, had introduced the CB radio to Australia some years prior, indirectly making the ability to organise the blockade possible in the first place. Dick Smith supplied helicopter services to Stephens and Watling free of charge to ship them to and from meetings. John Laws stoked the flames of the protest and successfully endeared the men to the nation, with local community members in the Wallandilly bringing food and water to the men all across the week, until their DIY industrial action shouting was finally heard. At the conclusion of the blockade, road taxes were completely abolished. Speed limits were increased. The gross weight limit permissible per truck was increased by 3 tonnes, up to a total of 39. Finance companies had restrictions placed upon them in regards to the repossession of trucks and their now inability to do so. And a new truckers' union was registered, called the Australian Transport Industry Association, with Ted Stephens agreeing to become its inaugural president. In short, the truckies won. Some historians have referred to this event as the greatest act of Australian civil disobedience since the Eureka Stockade. And while that might be stretching it a little bit in my opinion, it's certainly not stretching it by much. I would go as far to say that it's the most successful act of Australian civil disobedience ever recorded, including the Eureka Stockade. I mean, 30 of the guys at the Eureka were literally shot and killed. Stephens and co. literally got all of their demands. But that's it, guys. That's it for another video. I hope you liked this story of my hometown and a struggle against adversity. Please don't forget to click that subscribe button. It's down there in the bottom corner. Check out my other videos on this channel in this playlist. If there's anything that takes your eye, click around. If you're not subscribed, don't judge me now on this one video. Watch a couple of other ones. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe. And yeah, as always, if you're Australian or if you've heard about things that are Australian and there is a specific story from history or a particular person or a particular event that you want me to look into, just let me know. Chuck it in the comments and you never know, it might be one of the videos that you see coming up. I'm not doing the Emu War though. That's boring. There are plenty of other videos on it. Just search the Emu War and you'll find it. So, once again, thanks for watching the video. Hit subscribe, check out my other ones. I'm over talking now, but yeah, thanks.